Long ago, when the winds of independence swept across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, people believed they were finally free. Colonizers had packed their bags, flags of liberation fluttered in the air, and the world thought the chains of slavery and exploitation had been broken. But what the people did not know was that the empire had simply changed its face. No longer would it come in the form of soldiers carrying guns or administrators issuing orders. This time, it would come dressed in suits, carrying briefcases, speaking the language of investment, progress, and development. This new empire had a different name: multinational companies. These corporations were not small traders or local businesses. They were giants with the power of entire governments, backed by banks, lawyers, and foreign states. They promised jobs, infrastructure, and prosperity. But in reality, they had only one goal: to extract as much wealth as possible from lands rich in resources, leaving behind poverty and broken dreams. It was not called colonialism anymore. It was called globalization, free trade, and foreign investment. But for the ordinary farmer, miner, or fisherman, the story remained the same: resources taken away, lives exploited, and futures stolen. Imagine a village in the heart of Africa. Beneath its soil lies gold, diamonds, or oil. For generations, the villagers have lived a modest life, planting crops, fishing in rivers, living close to nature. Then one day, men arrive in expensive cars with government officials at their side. They announce that a foreign company has discovered valuable minerals under the ground. The villagers are told this is a blessing, that their lives will be transformed, that schools, hospitals, and jobs will soon come. Hope rises in the hearts of the people. But as time passes, that hope turns into sorrow. The land is seized, often with little or no compensation. The people are pushed away from the soil that fed them. Forests are cleared, rivers polluted, and air filled with smoke. The company builds massive mining sites or oil rigs, guarded by private security and sometimes even national armies. The villagers who are promised jobs are hired only for the lowest, most dangerous work, carrying heavy loads, working in toxic conditions, paid wages too small to survive. The management, the engineers, the profits, all of that belongs to the foreigners. Day after day, ships leave the ports carrying minerals, oil, and timber. Gold that could have built schools for millions. Oil that could have funded hospitals. Copper that could have created industries. All of it sails across the ocean to distant lands. The villagers are left with polluted water, destroyed farmlands, and diseases that were never there before. They were told they would be rich, but instead, they are poorer than ever. This is not just the story of one village. It is the story of entire nations. Countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, rich with cobalt, diamonds, and gold, should be among the wealthiest on earth. But the people live in misery, while multinational companies grow richer every year. Nigeria, with its vast oil reserves, should have been a paradise of development. Instead, its Niger Delta communities suffer from poisoned rivers and endless poverty. In Latin America, from Bolivia to Peru, indigenous lands filled with silver and lithium are taken by corporations that leave behind scars on the mountains and sickness in the people. In Asia, palm oil companies tear down rainforests, destroying both the environment and the lives of local communities. The theft is not done openly with guns, though violence often lurks in the background. It is done through contracts, legal papers, and complex trade agreements. The governments, often weak or corrupt, sign away national resources for tiny royalties or bribes. Leaders are convinced or forced to believe that foreign companies are the only way to develop. And when people resist, when they protest against the theft of their lands, they are silenced with force. Activists disappear. Communities are terrorized. And voices are crushed. But the greatest trick of multinational companies is the illusion they create. They present themselves as saviors, as the bringers of modernity. They sponsor events, donate, 2 charities, and build a few schools. Or the scale of this theft is almost unimaginable. Trillions of dollars worth of resources flow every year from Africa, Asia, and Latin America to the West and to the corporate capitals of the world. This money could have transformed entire continents, ending poverty, hunger, and disease. Instead, it is concentrated in the hands of a few multinational companies and their shareholders. And every year, as these companies grow richer, the people living on the land of gold and oil grow poorer. What makes this theft even more painful is the hypocrisy. The same countries that lecture the world about democracy and human rights are the ones whose corporations exploit the poor. The same leaders who speak of climate change allow their companies to destroy rainforests and pollute rivers. The same institutions that promote development are silent when multinationals rob nations of their resources. It is a silent war, fought not with weapons, but with contracts, corruption, and economic power. And yet, despite the suffering, there is resistance. Communities are rising, questioning the role of these companies. In the villages of Africa, elders tell their people that wealth under the soil should belong to them, not to foreigners. In Latin America, indigenous movements are fighting back, demanding the right to protect their lands. In Asia, activists are exposing how palm oil and textile companies exploit both workers and nature. Slowly, a global awakening is happening. But the struggle is not easy. Multinational companies are backed by powerful allies, foreign governments, international banks, and global institutions. They have armies of lawyers and endless money to protect their interests. They can topple governments that resist them, fund coups, and manipulate elections. History has shown this again and again, from Iran in the 1950s, when oil companies conspired to overthrow a government, to Congo in the 1960s, when a leader who stood for his people was assassinated because he dared to challenge the system. This is why the story of multinational resource theft is not just about economics. It is about justice, freedom, and dignity. It is about whether nations truly control their destiny or remain trapped in a cycle of exploitation disguised as development. The question is not whether resources exist, because they do, in abundance, but who controls them and for whose benefit they are used. In part 1 of this story, we see how multinational companies entered the post-colonial world as the new rulers of wealth. They replaced the direct colonizers, but their methods and goals remained the same: extraction, profit, and control. They convinced governments that their presence was necessary, but in reality, they came to drain. And they succeeded, building empires of wealth on the backs of poor communities. This is only the beginning of the story, because in the next part, we'll go even deeper into the mechanisms they use, how contracts are designed to trap nations, how profits are hidden in tax havens, how even aid and investment are tools of control. We will uncover the invisible empire of corporations, the way they shape global politics, and how nations can resist. But for now, the lesson is clear. Independence did not mean freedom from exploitation. The colonizer changed clothes, but the theft never stopped. The great resource robbery continues, hidden behind the smiling face of multinational corporations. And until people see through the illusion, until they rise to demand control of their own wealth, the cycle will continue. And the riches of the earth will remain in the hands of a few, while billions remain in poverty. When we look deeper into the hidden empire of multinational companies, we find that their power does not lie only in machines, factories, or oil rigs. Their true weapon is the system they have created, a system so complex and invisible that most people never see it. It begins with contracts. Long, complicated contracts filled with legal language that few people understand. When a poor nation signs a deal with a multinational company, it often believes it is securing development. But hidden inside those contracts are traps, A country may be told that it will earn royalties from the sale of its own resources, but the royalty might be only 2 or 3%, while the company keeps the remaining 97%. Sometimes the deal includes secret clauses that allow the company to avoid paying taxes, to export profits freely, or to sue the government if new laws threaten their business. In some cases, the contracts are signed in foreign courts under foreign laws, meaning that the nation itself has no real power to challenge the company. It is like selling your own house, but still being forced to pay rent for living inside it. These contracts are often negotiated not with transparency, but behind closed doors. Ministers are bribed, politicians receive gifts, and powerful leaders are promised shares or secret accounts. The company gets everything it wants, and the people get almost nothing. And because corruption is so widespread, even when the people demand justice, the government sides with the foreign corporations. Not with its own citizens, but contracts are only the first layer. The second weapon is the manipulation of money. Once a multinational company extracts resources, it does not keep its profits inside the country. Instead, it uses a system called profit shifting. Through clever accounting tricks, they claim that most of the profit was made somewhere else, usually in a tax haven where the tax rate is almost zero. Imagine a gold mine in Africa producing billions. But on paper, the company claims it is barely making a profit. Schools remain underfunded. Hospitals remain broken, but the company's shareholders enjoy record earnings. This is theft disguised as accounting. Then comes the third weapon: control of politics. Multinational companies know that their business depends on friendly governments. If a leader dares to stand against them, if a president or prime minister refuses to sign away resources, they face immense pressure. Sometimes, the pressure comes in the form of lobbying, diplomatic threats, or sanctions from powerful countries. But in the most extreme cases, it leads to coups and assassinations. History is filled with leaders who were removed or killed because they dared to challenge corporate interests. Think of Congo's Patrice Lumumba, who wanted his country's minerals to benefit his people, but instead was murdered, leaving Congo in chaos while foreign companies looted its wealth. Think of Iran's Mohammad Mossadegh, who tried to nationalize oil so that Iranians could profit from their own resources, only to be overthrown in a coup supported by oil companies and foreign powers. The message to the world was clear: leaders who resist multinational companies do not survive. Over time, entire nations are trapped in a cycle of dependency. They cannot industrialize because their raw materials are shipped abroad. They cannot collect taxes because companies hide their profits. They cannot build strong governments because corruption eats away at the system. And so, year after year, despite being rich in natural resources, they remain poor. This is the great paradox of our time. Nations sitting on mountains of gold, oil or diamonds, yet unable to provide clean water or education to their children. Another cruel layer of this system is how it ties into international institutions. The IMF and World Bank, which claim to help nations develop, often force countries to open their markets to foreign companies. They call it structural adjustment or economic reform. But in reality, it means that governments are not allowed to protect their industries, not allowed to nationalize resources, not allowed to resist foreign corporations. If they do, and while this theft continues, multinational companies polish their image with campaigns of deception. They sponsor sports events, put their logos on schools, and release glossy reports about sustainability. They talk about green energy while cutting down forests. They speak of human rights while exploiting workers. They claim to fight poverty while creating it. The gap between their public image and their private reality is like night and day. But perhaps the most painful part of this story is the human cost. Families forced to abandon their homes because of mining projects. Children working in dangerous conditions, their small hands digging for cobalt or mica used in smartphones and electric cars. Fishermen who can no longer fish because oil spills have poisoned their rivers. Women who must walk miles to find clean water because their wells have been contaminated. Entire generations growing up in poverty, even though the wealth of their land fuels the luxuries of distant nations. Yet despite this suffering, hope has not died. Around the world, movements are rising against the great resource theft. Communities are demanding that contracts be made public, that companies pay fair taxes, that resources be used for the benefit of the people. Some countries have begun to fight back, renegotiating deals, nationalizing industries, or taking corporations to court. It is not an easy battle, because the power of multinational companies is immense. But it is a battle worth fighting, because it is about dignity, justice, and the right of nations to control their own destiny. In Latin America, Bolivia under Evo Morales took control of its gas and lithium, using the profits to fund schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. In Africa, leaders like Thomas Sankara once dreamed of a continent free from corporate exploitation, a continent that would use its resources to uplift its people. Though Sankara was silenced, his vision lives on, in the hearts of many. In Asia, movements against palm oil and textile exploitation are growing stronger, exposing the crimes hidden behind cheap products. This resistance is not only local, it is global. Activists in the West are also speaking out, exposing how their own corporations steal from poorer nations. They are calling for accountability, for an end to tax havens, for transparency in corporate dealings. The Internet has given communities a voice, allowing them to share their stories and connect with others around the world. The illusion is cracking, and the truth is beginning to shine through. But the struggle is long. Multinational companies are still powerful, and they will not give up their wealth easily. They will continue to lobby, to manipulate, to deceive. They will continue to dress up their exploitation with fancy words like investment, growth, and sustainability. They will continue to build an empire on the backs of the poor. The question is whether people will see through the lies, whether nations will find the courage to reclaim what is theirs. The story of multinational companies and the great resource theft is not just a story of economics. It is the story of our world today, a world where a handful of corporations are richer than entire nations, where the lives of billions are shaped by decisions made in corporate boardrooms. It is the story of how modern colonialism continues, not with soldiers and flags, but with contracts, banks, and trade. And it is also the story of resistance, of people who refuse to remain silent, of nations that dare to dream of a future where their wealth belongs to them, and not to strangers across the sea. As we close this journey, we are left with a choice. Do we accept the system as it is, allowing corporations to keep robbing nations in the name of globalization? Or do we demand change? A world